Welcome back to the Jagged Edge, unscripted and uncut NFL talk, focusing on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Today we have a very special guest, the newest member of the Florida Times Union beat, Demetrius Harvey. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, man. Just a little tired, but I'm still here. The Jaguars are doing well, and it's been fun to write about them and do everything that I've been doing for the past few years, but just for a different network. So I'm really excited, and I hope you're doing well too.
Thanks, Demetrius. I actually did want to ask, since this is your first time on the beat, you get to travel with the with the Florida Times Union to report on this team. So how's that
Mhm.
like for the first month of the season? Being able to go to different stadiums. I mean, you got to see one really poor one in Washington. Then you got to see this like basically the polar opposite in Los Angeles, and then you
Mhm.
get kind of the middle of the road one there in Philly. So how's traveling so far this
It
season?
it's been a blast. I mean, honestly, I said it after the Eagles game. It was amazing to see the Eagles fans. I think that they're incredible. Obviously I haven't seen every single fan base in their home cities and their home stadiums, but the Eagles one, it's going to be up there for a while. From start to finish, I thought that they were into it. They were booing, after the first quarter for them because it was 14-0
Oh
Jaguars.
man.
And I could just tell, how passionate they are about, the Eagles and just them playing well and things like that. But yeah, traveling to Los Angeles was incredible. I had never been out there. So being able to go and see like a different city, even if it's for a day, was pretty cool. And then that stadium SoFi is state of the art. I haven't seen the Vegas stadium yet, which I hear is even better. So
Ooh.
I'm excited to eventually see that one.
Oh
But
no,
those two
that
stadiums were great. The Washington one,
yeah,
like you
I've heard
said,
stories. I've heard stories about that Washington press
yeah,
box.
it was
We will not
it
name
was
names of who
interesting.
said what it was like before, but we've just heard horror stories about that one for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. So, we can just leave it at that. That was a trip. So there you go.
If only been better if they did come up with the W that day, but
Mm,
that's then in the past. Speaking of the past, we will talk about the Eagles game for a little bit. It is Thursday, but
mm.
I mean, there's not much really to be said. 14-point lead could have potentially been up three possessions if maybe Trevor Lawrence doesn't drop the football when he had
Yep.
space to run or Tim Jones wide open. But it is what it is. How is that locker room progressing from that game on to say now, like a few days before one of the biggest games of the season so far?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's actually funny. I mean, it's almost the same way after a loss or a win. This Jaguars locker room is over it by Wednesday. I mean, by the time we get in there, we're like ready. All right, we have to ask so and so about how they played against the 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 Eagles and so and so about what they need to improve on. They're already over it. They're done. They're ready to move on to the Texans this week. They sort of sweep it under the rug on Monday. After their meetings, they watch the film, they correct their stuff, but this locker room remains confident. That's the one thing that I've noticed out of them is that Doug Peterson seems to have a really good handle on making sure the so what now what mentality kind of stays true, not only do through a win, but also through a loss. So what now what? You lost. Who cares? Now you're going to play the Texans. You have a divisional opponent, arguably more important of a game than the Eagles game anyway. Who cares how you played? Now you can go out and correct it. That's sort of been the mentality the entire time. And I think that that's something that's good. That's something that you haven't seen in Jacksonville for quite some time, where, on Wednesdays after a bad game, and I know 2018, they were still talking about, they're still mad, they're still doing things, but this year, completely different mentality. I think that that's something that is going to carry over for them. And, for them, hopefully they'll win more, because of it.
Speaking of Trevor Lawrence, the birthday boy, as we record this, 23 years old. That's the thing, though. Had his worst game of the year. Still only 23. Could he have another game like that? Sure. But
Mhm.
what I know he throughout the week, especially I think it was yesterday's press conference, just talking just vibrantly, so confidently in that press conference yesterday, even despite having probably the worst game of his career. I mean,
Mhm.
he, out of all people, seems like the one that wants to come back the most from Sunday's loss.
Yeah, it's really interesting. He's probably one of the most mature young players you'll meet. Obviously you can tell his age when talks about, TV shows like The Office and things like that. But you really know, it's when he's standing up there at the podium, he's asked the tough questions, as a lot of Jaguar fans love to say. He ends up almost coming off as though he's been in the league for like 10 years. He understands it. He knows what's going on. He's not naive to what he did on Sunday. Right after the game, people were kind of getting on him. They were like, he didn't own it. I guess they didn't watch the press conference because right as soon as he came out there, he was like, yeah, that's on me. I played terribly. Can't drop the ball that many times and win. Blah blah blah. So it's an ownership level. Sorry to use the own it term from last year, but it still holds true. I just thought about it, but it still holds true. And Trevor has been able to sort of get in there and be himself, but also come off as this very mature player. He's not going to give you the Gardner Minshew deadpans or the laughs or anything like that very often. But it doesn't matter, because that's not necessarily what you want from a quarterback. You want him to be a leader, be a veteran sort of presence for that offense, so that they're not overwhelmed. I think that one thing is clear is that he's not going to be a guy, excuse me, he's not going to be a guy to sort of get in there and just get down on himself, lose his confidence. He's going to be a guy who's going to bring people up. He might not do it in the raw way that some other quarterbacks would, but he's going to do it in his own way. I think that the players respect that. The players want him to be able to communicate with them, and that's sort of what he's been doing, the entire time I've been covering him.
For sure, for sure. And since we are done with the first 4 weeks of the season, what were your expectations coming into the year after these 4 game stretch? Because I feel like a lot of us predicted a 2-2 start, but maybe this isn't the 2-2 start that we be thinking where the Jacksonville Jaguars would be at right now.
Yeah, no, I think that if you were projecting a 2-2 start, I would imagine you would have said they'll beat Washington and then they'll lose to LA and then they'll beat the Colts, or
Yeah, so yeah,
the
first two
Colts game
wins,
was
yeah,
right,
first 2 games
right.
wins, and then the next 2 games losses, but it didn't play
hmm
out that way.
Yeah, it didn't play out that way, and I think that one thing you can take away from it is, hey, they're able to go to the West Coast, not only win but win big, that's something that they've never been able to do. Um, they've always been in tight races against the thin Oakland Raiders. They never won in LA before that. They never won in San Francisco. They never won in Seattle. They just can't do it over on the West Coast for whatever reason. So you're able to go in there, you're able to win big. That should give you some confidence. That means that the team is on the right track. That means that the team is able to beat a good team, maybe a team that they weren't supposed to beat. Even if the Chargers had injuries or whatever, the Jaguars are a young team. Everybody has an excuse for why they might lose any given week. But one thing's for sure, this isn't the Jaguars team that I think most people would have thought coming into this year. Now, the season's long. If they end up losing to the Texans and then losing to the Colts, everybody's going to change their mind again, and that's normal.
Yeah,
But it's definitely a team that you can tell it's just different. I'm not saying they're going to go to the playoffs, not saying they're doing anything outstanding at the end of the season, but you can just tell that it feels like a real football team this time around, and I think that's a huge step up.
for sure. So basically, this all really depends on Trevor Lawrence at the end of the day, as we talked about. I mean, the challenges between now and say up until the bye week is just trying to just not even get better every week, but just try to execute, the
Mhm.
game plans and just trying to just do simple stuff. Well, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, you have to go into each week kind of thinking, hey, we have our guys. I think that what Doug does a really good job of is putting his players in position to win, a position to be successful. Everyone sort of ragged on Christian Kirk's contract at the beginning of the spring, where he's making $72 million. They're like, oh man, he's not worth that. $18 million per year, or 17, whatever it works out to. And then all of a sudden, through the first 4 games of the season, he's like, top 10 in yards per catch. And he's one of the, honestly, one of the top wideouts so far this season. Now, he might not be the biggest guy who's going to put up those ESPN stats or ESPN highlights, but he's going to be a guy who's clearly dependable, clearly a very important piece to this puzzle. Where I'm doing a story action on this where Christian Kirk is all of a sudden in the backfield. He's going to split out wide, and then you got Jamal Agnew getting into the backfield, just doing a bunch of different things, motions. Like it's a completely different offense. Sort of chipping it away, and as you were saying, where it's not something where it's boom or bust. Last year with Urban, it seemed like if they didn't get that 50-yard bomb, they're not going to get anything because they weren't going to run James Robinson.
Oh man.
So I feel like this year there's a plan, there's a method to the madness. I think that's pretty much the biggest thing with this team, and I think Doug Peterson obviously is the catalyst to that.
Yeah, definitely a lot more creative. It is like a
Mm.
lot of the backfield looks when they did send Agnew or Kirk
Mhm.
or even ETN, like all moving around.
And it's crazy. It's
Or
crazy because the Jaguars for so long, every single year. I know you've been watching forever. Every single
yes.
year, you could go out there 1st and 10. You knew they were going to run the football probably for 2 yards. They're going to run it again probably for another 2 yards, and then they're going to throw on 3rd and 6 or longer, and then it'll be incomplete, and then they punt. You can predict it every single time, and then everybody obviously would have hoped that it's going to be different this time around. No matter who was the offensive coordinator, it was the same exact offense. So I know, I'm sure from a fan perspective, to see all that different thing, the motioning, the creativity, it brings excitement. I know it's simple things, but the reason why it brings so much excitement is because for so many years it's been the same thing. So I get it. I get it, and I think that Doug has been one of the best additions that this team could have made. And it's crazy to say that because, at the beginning of the year when they were doing this search, I thought, okay, Doug Peterson, if they want to hire that guy, he took a 1 year off. He was fired by the Eagles, and yeah, they won a Super Bowl, but is this the new innovative, fun guy you need? Sometimes you don't need that guy. Sometimes you just need the guy that's already shown success, and that's sort of what they have.
For sure. And speaking of the past, the next opponent we face in the Houston Texans, we've lost to them 8 games in a row. No matter if they had Deshaun Watson or Davis Mills, Tyrone Taylor. It's just
Mhm.
we've just lost to them, no matter if they were just as bad as we were, or they're just simply the better team, like they were, say, a few years ago when Watson was quarterback in our
Mhm.
little own personal, I guess, Colts and Jacksonville streak. So, but when you look at them on paper, they're not really a team that should give Jacksonville a contest. Is that disrespectful, or am I thinking the
It
right way?
it's not disrespectful. I think that when you look at different teams, everyone has their own configurations. The Jaguars are a very young team as well. I think that the Texans are too. They just haven't had that chance to sort of rebuild in the way that you would like. They've traded away picks. They've had to get picks from, for Watson, for example, and they haven't been able to use them yet, because a lot of those picks were for the future. If you just look at how they built around their team, they haven't necessarily had the additions that other teams have had. So they're young, they're inexperienced, the talent's not necessarily there anymore. Whitney Merciless isn't there anymore. JJ Watt's not there anymore. Jadeveon Clowney's not there anymore. That guy hasn't been there for a while, but those were
Yeah.
guys that were force players for them. Over the years, and when they were making that streak against the Jaguars, they've always had that one guy at least.
DeAndre Hopkins, Arian
Yeah,
Foster,
yeah,
even like there's like
yeah,
history, Andre Johnson, like even
yeah,
like when they were not winning the division, they've always had guys that seem to have just dogged us every time they played against us before.
yeah. No, it's true. And you have guys, or you have a Texas team that's won not only eight the last 8 times, but I think it's something like 10 of the last 12 because they had
Yeah,
that one
because of
year
the
in
one
in in, in
yeah, anomaly.
2017.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
it was an anomaly year against the Texans, and when you think of it that way, it's like how the hell does this team always have the better hand over Jacksonville every single year? It doesn't matter what, just like you said, it doesn't matter if the Jaguars are good, have more talent, or they don't. Either way, the Texans would win. But getting back to Sunday's
Now,
game, yeah,
yes.
that's different, and then that's a time where I think really the Jaguars do have the talent advantage. I think they do have the experience over them, even though it's not as much experience. I think they have the better quarterback. I think they have the better offense. Obviously the running game for Houston has been heating up with Dameon Pierce, who's incredible.
For sure. As you
But
covered him with the Florida Gators before,
yeah.
for sure.
Yep. For the past couple of years, I covered him with the Florida Gators, and that guy was he's probably one of the most fun players you can talk to. But he's also one of the most fun players you can just watch on the field. And the only person in the state of Florida, maybe in the whole world, that didn't seem to appreciate that was Dan
Mullen.
Mullen, who just
Yeah.
he just would not
Exactly.
want
I'm
to
not
do.
even that big of a Gator fan as say as I was way back
Mhm.
then, but every time you turned on the TV for the past 2 or 3 years of Gators football, every time Dameon Pierce got the ball, it seems like he got 8, 9, 10 yards a carry. It seemed like it was crazy.
The guy averaged over 5 yards a carry. It wasn't like he was coming in and got 10 carries in one season and had 50 yards or something. Oh man, why aren't you giving him the ball? It was a pretty, if he was getting the ball, he got it 100 times his last year, and I think he had 500 and something yards. I mean, it was is as efficient as you can be. But anyway, it's a team that's coming into Jacksonville. I think that will obviously they're winless. They have a lot to play for. They're probably going to be pumped up. They're probably going to be thinking we own this team just like the Jaguars did against the Colts. We own this team at home. The same thing with the Texans. Even though it's not the same players, you can look at that schedule and say Jaguars aren't going to be a team that we're that scared of. And so I think that ultimately the Jaguars probably win, but it's definitely something where you have to kind of hold your breath because guess what? Texans have owned them sadly, for them over the past 4 years.
Yeah, it's like I made a couple notes here too. It's like they're fifth lowest in the league in total touchdowns, or
Mhm.
seventh lowest in scoring offense. And on third downs, they're 14 to 52, which is 27%, and only behind Carolina as the worst third down conversion team in the NFL.
That's
But
awful.
like you said, Dameon Pierce, he gets the ball.
Mhm.
He's getting more and more carries every week. We allowed over 200 rushing yards last week, maybe because of those conditions in
Sure.
Philadelphia, but it's just something to worry. That's like, the Jaguar fan and me, and I guess many others could be like, ah,
Mhm.
crap, what if this is a game where, we go back to reality and be like,
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it's easy for that thought to creep into your mind when I mean the Jaguars have won 4 games over the last 2 years. If they win on Sunday, they'll almost tie that number. And so it's easy to think, hey man, like this real? Because you really don't know. The rug could be pulled out from under you. And in 2018, they were 3-1. I mean, they had just beaten the Patriots. They were gonna go to the Super Bowl, right? And then you know what happened after that. So so
Once
I
everybody.
understand having that pessimism or that like kind of clinching feeling because it's really easy with this team to think that way. But yeah, you're right. I think one thing about the 210 yards against the Eagles that they led up, one of the factors obviously was Jalen Hurts. He's a guy that was able to run around. He's able to demand a guy pretty much playing spy. They had Devin Lloyd playing spy a lot of the time. I think that what happened was, they were so determined to stop Jalen Hurts that, when Miles Sanders is able to get that crease, that can happen. That's sort of the nature of the Eagles offense and why it's so good. Then you add in that there was driving rain the entire time. I don't think that it really portrayed or got through to the TV screens because I noticed a lot of people were saying
Yeah.
how it didn't look that bad, but it was bad. It was terrible the entire day. Literally from the time I got to Philly, pretty much that next morning until I left the next day, it was raining. I mean, it was bad. It was raining. It was cold. It was windy. Terrible conditions. Probably the worst conditions they'll play in this year, barring something crazy
Snow
happening.
game probably in December
Yeah,
somewhere.
now all of a sudden they're going to get a snow game somehow,
Oh,
somewhere.
the Jets game,
Uh,
Thursday night Jets
yeah,
game,
well,
probably.
don't put that curse on me because I'm going to
Oh,
that one. I will
well,
quit. No, no, I won't. But yeah, so it was a terrible circumstances. I think that going into this game, they're going to be better or better prepared for it. So I think they'll be able to handle Dameon Pierce a little bit more, even without Fadakasi if he can't go. So I think it'll be a pretty much a better game than last week.
For sure. And since we talked about the offense, I also took a look at the Texans defense. And the thing about them is as much yards as they've allowed, especially on the ground, they haven't been able to break. I saw that they allowed only they're the fourth worst total odd defense in the NFL,
Mhm.
almost allowing 412 yards every single game. But they're in the middle of the pack, 16th in scoring defense. They're just not breaking. I mean, that's also a credit to Lovie Smith,
Mhm.
longtime head coach in the NFL. It's kind of like Doug Peterson did take his team to a Super Bowl before, but they have a
Mhm.
lot of young pieces like Jalen Petre and Derek Stingley
Mhm.
that, are very, very promising young
Yeah,
players for that
they're
defense.
yeah, they're talented young guys, you know. Petre is a guy that I liked out of Baylor. I thought that he would make an incredible either nickel or I guess they're playing him at safety here in Houston. Um, and Stingley obviously is a guy, in my opinion, when he first when his rookies or his freshman season, I think in 2019, I thought that he could play and then just come out and be an NFL starter right then and there. You know, obviously it didn't happen. The next 2 years were what they were. He got hurt, a bunch of other stuff, just like it didn't work out. But he ended up going like third overall anyway, so it didn't matter for him. And you know, he's a fantastic player. I don't know necessarily if he's playing fantastic this year so far, but you know, he's a guy that's going to be able to go in there and actually have success. And I think that this Texans defense, like you said, it's not a super overly talented front. It's not a defense that you're necessarily that scared of, but they have a couple pieces. Jonathan Grenard, I covered him for his 1 year at Florida, and you know, he was a fantastic player, one of their better pieces in that 2020 defense. You know, they have Christian Kirksey, who, you know, has had his moments. You know, other guys, you know, I don't really know too much about, honestly, but they're not pushovers. They play hard, like you said, for Lovie Smith, and he's a guy that's been in the NFL forever. And he's a guy who's going to play his base defense, and he's going to try to play it to the best of their ability. But I think that that's something that the Jaguars can take advantage of. It's something that they know what they're going to run. They're not very complicated. They're not tricky or anything. It's just straight up, kind of like the Colts defense in terms of the, you know, having whatever their defense is, it is what it is. Um, so
Whatever Gus Bradley runs out there
yeah,
in
well,
Indianapolis these days.
whatever Gus Bradley runs up there, which is I still don't understand why he just continues to put out the same exact thing over and over again, expecting a different result. But whatever, that's for them to worry about. But yeah, the Texans, while they might not be as talented, in my opinion, as the Jaguars, they're still a team that, you know, is scrappy. They're going to fight hard, kind of like Gus Bradley's Jaguars several years ago.
For sure. And despite all that, I think one of the things that people did complain about last week is not
Hmm.
running the dang football. And the biggest thing that I highlighted was that they have allowed 172 rushing yards a game so far, which is second worst in the NFL. So basically, we are going to talk about keys to the game. I feel like the biggest one for Jacksonville is not to give Travis Etienne or even James Robinson less than 10 carries each for this game. They just got to just establish the run as soon as they can.
Yeah, you would think so, right? I think it's funny one thing, and it's too early to say this, but you know, every staff, and since James has been here, has sort of undervalued him in a way. You know, they didn't draft him in 2020. They brought him in here as an undrafted free agent. He had to fight his way, and then finally was able to
Yeah,
pretty much force
they
his
cut
way.
Leonard Fournette
Yeah,
for James Robinson to get all the
yeah.
carries. And
Yep, and then they gave James all the carries last year. We know what happened with Urban. He hated James for whatever reason. And then this year they're kind of playing it like, you know, why isn't James getting the ball? It's kind of this a similar thing, but you know, I think it's a little bit too early to say that necessarily. I think that you're right. This is going to be the game. If you're going to have any game so far and through the first 5 weeks of the season, to give James Robinson the football, you know, 15, 20, you know, times, you know, it's this one. You know, I know that Travis Etienne, you need to put him on the field and you need to get him carries too, but um playing the hot hand is going to be pivotal in this one. I think that James
yeah, for
has an
sure, you don't have to
ability.
force them,
Mhm.
but I would like both of them to get more than 8 yards. And
So
personally, as a fan, I want them to get the ball more than 8 times because they
yeah,
both can be pretty dynamic in different ways when they have the ball in their hands.
yeah. I mean, we haven't seen Travis yet come out and have that 50 yard. It seemed like he's like close
Every
every so
time,
often.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's like about to get there, and then all of a sudden it doesn't happen. So yeah, give them both the football. You're going up against a team that has allowed, like you said, 172 yards per game on the ground. If there's 1 week to do it, go ahead and do it now.
Yeah, especially when that crowd's gonna be behind your back. We did talk
Mhm.
about it before we started recording. Tony Boselli game. Ironic because and how he ended up on the Texans, but
Mhm.
I mean, this is just a big game, big divisional game. You have a chance to go 2-0 in your division. That's super important this early on. And then you get another one next week. But of course, we
Yep.
can't overlook, to Indianapolis next week, and then just got to take care of business today.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's gonna be interesting. Tony Boselli, obviously getting honored at halftime. Their first Hall of Fame player, it's a huge day and it's a huge honor. And obviously the ties to the Texans when he was drafted first overall by the Texans, in their expansion draft. Never played a single down for them, but I do think it is funny that Houston's coming to town and they're doing this on the same day, alumni weekend. All of the alumni will be there. So, if there's any game that the Jaguars want to perform well, this is pretty much a homecoming game, if you will, for them. So, this is going to be the one. I think that you're right. They can't overlook the Colts, but yeah, the next 2 weeks, this is probably the most important stretch they've had so far. I think that the month of October as a whole is probably their most important stretch. And I think that, it's a team that has the ability if they play up to their standards to go maybe 3-1 4-0 over the next 4 games. But will that happen? I don't know. It's just they have that ability.
For sure. Besides that, what would you say would be the most important thing besides maybe establishing the run? It has to
Mhm.
be just getting that ball away from Davis Mills because he hasn't
Yeah.
looked good at all to start
No.
off the season. It's just
Hmm.
you got to force third and longs and try to have him have the ball in his hands and try to make a play.
Yeah, and the Jaguars defense has been pretty good on third downs, even against the
Eagles,
against
yeah,
the Eagles. Yeah, they were pretty good on third down. It was just that the Eagles also went for it on fourth down. They did this and that. So yeah, getting the Texans to third and long situations, making sure that you just keep an eye on Brandon Cooks, and after that, just play your man pretty much, and making sure that they can't convert those long third downs. I think that starts with stopping the run. But it ends with getting off on third downs. I think that that's something that they're going to have to key in on. They're going to have to make sure that they can force different situations where Davis Mills is has to stand in the pocket and maybe get hit by Josh Allen or Trayvon Walker. Just things like that. I think that this week is a little different because they're going up against a quarterback who's pretty much a statue. I think he has maybe negative rushing yards this year, so he's not a guy who's going to be taking off and running like Jalen Hurts. So you're not going to worry about that. You don't need to spy on him. Just play sound defense. Literally, this is probably one of the most basic games that you can play, in my opinion. Run the ball, stop the run, and you'll win. So yeah, they just have that going for them. I think that that's probably the next biggest key: getting off on third down, making sure to force turnovers, which they've been good at this year.
for sure. And since we're almost toward that time where we're gonna stop real soon,
Mhm.
what are your final score predictions and your basically who do you think is gonna stand out for this Sunday? Is there
Yeah,
anybody? Yeah,
I think I have them winning 30-13. It's not often you get to predict a potential blowout for the Jaguars, but I really do believe that this team is pretty good. Just talking with all the players and going to all the press conferences, going to the games and seeing them and at before and after games, I get a sense of their mentality. I feel like I understand what they know that they have what it takes to win. I know that they have the confidence. And I really do think that they're a better team than the Texans. Just what I've seen, Houston just hasn't been able to pull it out. Yeah, they've been in games. Obviously they tie with the Colts, but the Jaguars destroyed the Colts. The Jaguars didn't play close with the Chargers. It's one of those things where I just have a good feeling that this team is different than before, and they could always prove me wrong, but I feel like they're going to be able to go in there and win. I think that, uh, like you said, James Robinson, Travis Etienne, they're in store for big games. I think that this is the game where you say, oh wow, look at that Jaguars running game. Maybe Travis finally has his breakout game. I think that this is a possibility for both those guys. I think that defensively, Josh Allen, has an opportunity to add to his sack total. I just think that it's a pretty good game to sort of test where they fit in terms of how much they can win against lesser opponents. Are they going to play down to their opponent, or are they going to play up? And I feel like this is a team that will play up. I think that if they get the ball rolling, that's all they need. So yeah, 30-13. That's what I'm predicting. If they prove me wrong, then it is what it is.
Man, I mean, you mean I have the same sentiment as you. I feel like this has to be the game where Travis
Mhm.
Etienne, I mean, James Robinson already had his 50-yard touchdown early on.
Sure.
I mean, I hope I want another one. That would be nice on Sunday, but we need Travis Etienne to finally get his big play to start off. Maybe not even like kickstart, but I guess, yeah, maybe kickstart that
Mhm.
narrative that, oh, maybe he should get the ball more, but it should be a perfect balance of both. I think Trevor Lawrence does not lose the football 5 times on Sunday, God forbid.
Yeah.
This is a game where I think everything on offense will click. The Texans haven't been able to stop teams from even like teams like Chicago Bears. They let them move the ball. Khalil Herbert got 100 and whatever rushing yards on them for God's sake with that offensive line. So it's just play clean game. They're gonna get a few turnovers on defense. I feel like I can be confident that they can get Jalen Hurts to cause a mistake. I don't think Davis Mills will, keep that football in his hands.
Yeah.
I personally think it's going to be something like 41-19, where heck, even the backups could come in. I feel like they can just kill this
If
game super early on.
if you think, I mean, hey, if they end up putting the backups in, honestly, I would love that, from a journalism perspective, because I get to write very
As soon as
early. I
possible.
can
Yeah.
just sit back, I can finish my takeaways before everything else is out of the way. So yeah, go for it. If
Yeah.
they want to blow them out and the backups start getting in, then yeah, I'm down.
It's like everything logically what we've seen the first 4 weeks. It
Mhm.
just counts for the Jacksonville Jaguars just blowing them out in the water early on and just, a
Mhm.
nice, easy game. But as we know, this team has not made things easy in the past, but I hope that changes.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think this is the game, like I said, for them to kind of show everybody, how they can play against weaker opponents. So we'll just have to see on Sunday.
Demetrius, it was so nice having you on. I do want to thank you again. Besides, I guess, game recaps later on the week, is there anything else you got going on for yourself?
Yeah, and I appreciate you having me on and everything. Yeah, I have the Jaguars locker room story pretty much is where I'll go in the locker room, ask questions about what I'm trying to write about. So this week I'm doing something on the Jaguars offense, how they've sort of modernized it finally. They're back into they're actually into the 21st century in terms of that. They're using motion, a bunch of that kind of stuff. So check that out on that'll go up tomorrow on digital and then in print on Saturday. So check that out. And then there's a preview on Sunday, and then obviously my game recap and all that good stuff. And we're on to the Indianapolis Colts after that.
For sure. I want to thank everyone for tuning into this episode of the Jagged Edge. Again, Demetrius, you're awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for all the hard work you do for the Florida Times Union and for Jaguars fans everywhere.
I
But your
appreciate it, man.
content is, yeah, it's weird because I do work at a Wawa. Every time I see the lady deliver newspapers at like 4 in the morning, it's usually that Jaguar story on the top.
Oh
Like
man.
like when I came in back from doing trash outside, I saw the Blake Bortles retirement story. I said, who wrote this?
Oh,
Demetrius
that's
Harvey.
amazing.
It's
That's
like,
amazing, man.
yeah, so I was like, damn, I was like, this is awesome. Just seeing you from someone I've interacted with in
Mhm.
person at Jaguars games before you decided to start writing for the Jags. It's amazing to see,
It's been a
your
whirlwind, and
growth, your growth since, I was basically hanging out with you at say like, at Jaguar games. It's wild.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, it's been a whirlwind, and I'm just trying to keep getting better and providing everybody with the best coverage I can. And I love this. This is a dream come true. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you and everybody else who wants to read my stuff and actually values my opinion for whatever reason they do. So I appreciate it.
If anything, I'll always appreciate your opinion. I'm gonna leave you be now. I hope you have a good night.
Mhm.
Thank you everyone for watching again. Like, subscribe. Please follow Demetrius on Twitter if you haven't already. You probably already have if you're clicking on this video. But all right, guys, talk to you soon. Demetrius, thank you again. Everybody, have a good night.